In men's cricket, the Big Three hegemony took 100 years to build. In women's cricket, associate nations like Scotland, Thailand, UAE and the USA aren't just making up the numbers, they're competing. And in some cases, they're getting surprisingly close to beating full members. Why is the skill gap so much smaller in the women's game compared to the men's? Well, let's start off with the basics. What is an associate member? Associate members are the governing bodies for cricket of a country recognized by the ICC, which does not qualify as a full member but where cricket is firmly established and organized. The essential difference between associate members and full members is that the latter have a right to play official test matches, have full voting rights at meetings of the ICC, and are automatically qualified to play one-day internationals and T20 internationals. It's clear that the ICC has taken steps to ensure that up-and-coming nations are focusing on women's cricket as well. And the advantage that emerging nations have is that they don't have to dismantle 100 years of men's first infrastructure. They are building women's programs as professional entities from day one. Most full members in men's cricket have advanced cricket ecosystems that have evolved over time to include club structures, first-class systems, national academies and school competitions, amongst others. Over time, this created deep talent pools. And for newbies entering the sport in this millennium, the leading teams were already generations ahead. Catching up requires not just improving players, but building entire sporting cultures, something we'd spoken about even in the video on why Australia dominates women's cricket. Now, let's look at contracts. Men's cricket took decades to professionalize. And when it did start happening amongst the full members, the associate members took at least another couple of decades to pick up on it and implement the same. Such systemic dormancy has made it harder to narrow the gap between themselves and the best teams in the world. On the other hand, in women's cricket, Australia was a torchbearer when they introduced central contracts for their female players in 2008. But most teams only started professionalizing post-2013. And less than a decade later, we've seen the likes of Brazil, Namibia and Nepal, countries nowhere on the cricketing map then, offer contracts to their ladies now. The same goes for funding too. The highest player spend in men's cricket is undertaken by BCCI, who spend in excess of $8 million in match fees, central contracts and domestic player contracts. In contrast, Cricket Australia spends about $2 million for their women's cricketers, the most for any women's team in the sport. To put things in perspective, $100,000 investment in an associate men's team might not meaningfully push the performance needle, but a similarly sized investment in a women's team could be the difference between a strong showing at the qualifier and a potential World Cup berth. Because professionalism came later, the global baseline skill level was closer together. To draw an analogy, it's easier to catch a moving train when it's leaving the station, not when it's already moving at full speed. Also, the T20 format has been a great equalizer. We've heard that time and time again, but how? In women's cricket, T20s have accelerated the competitiveness of associate members. Broadly, I think it's because of three major reasons. T20s reduce the importance of squad depth. Unlike tests and to an extent ODIs, T20 teams primarily focus on their first 11 rather than the depth of talent in their squad. In longer formats, even if an associate team competes well for a part of the game, the stronger team's depth eventually takes over. T20s negate this significantly. Because the game is shorter, weaknesses have lesser time to be exposed. A 10-ball 25 or a tight 2-over spell or even a blinder taken in the outfield could be a match-changing performance. Associate teams can focus resources on developing a core group of match-impact players rather than building a full squad with equal depth. Further, the complex tactical decision-making that comes with the longer formats is very demanding. Managing things like bowling rotations over long periods, batting tempo shifts, or player fatigue is something that can be learnt only through experience. T20 cricket simplifies many of these decisions. The high variance nature of it means that while the options are endless, the strategies can more or less be bucketed into certain clearly defined types. This helps associate teams maximize their strengths by focusing preparation around specific match phases. And how can we forget the advent of franchise leagues? They have created more opportunities for associate players to gain exposure to high-quality cricket and have steepened the growth curve for such players in ways unimaginable before. The obvious positives include playing alongside international players, access to specialist training, and the financial incentive to invest more time in cricket. But these positives primarily impact the player. It's the second-order effects that facilitated the growth of associate members as a whole. Some of these include bringing such nations into the spotlight for more franchise think tanks to ID talent. A Catherine Rice featuring in the WPL and doing well builds enough credibility for other franchises to look at Scotland for more value-for-money recruits. Such visibility encourages players in these regions to pursue cricket more seriously. And when players see viable professional pathways, participation increases. This in turn leads to an increased chance in them being scouted to the big leagues. Greater talent depth strengthens national teams. There are of course more reasons to why T20s have helped the associate nations, but I don't think any of them have contributed as much as the above three. This is more of a subjective take, as there's no way for me to conclusively prove this. But another reason why skill gaps are easier to close in the women's game is their physique, specifically with how their bowlers function. In the men's game, the physical ceiling is incredibly high. While most full member nations now possess multiple bowlers who can bowl in excess of 140 clicks and even 150 clicks, the lack of adequate training and focus means that crossing such barriers become very difficult. Outside of the European associates and maybe a couple in the Africa and Americas region, associate pacers mostly bowl in the 125 to 130 km per hour range. The jump from 130 to 140 kmph and beyond is usually done through technical tweaks, and it requires either knowing technical nuances of the art yourself or training under one who does. In a way, this is the gap that men's cricket seems to be stuck in. On the other hand, the speed variance is much narrower in the women's game. Most elite women pacers operate between the 110 to 125 kmph pace band, with the likes of Bonga Khaka and Renuka Singh usually bowling at about 100 to 105 clicks, almost in the same range as Nepal's Kavita Kumar or UAE's Samaira Dharni. When the physical gap is narrower, the margins then hinge on more controllable aspects such as bowling discipline, bowling plans and fielding efficiency. To conclude, for most of cricket's history, the global hierarchy barely changed. A small group of teams stayed at the top and everyone else stayed behind. But women's cricket is entering a very different phase because multiple countries are building professional structures at the same time. And when opportunity spreads, improvement accelerates. Which means that the next major shift in women's cricket may not come from the usual teams. It may come from a country that until recently wasn't even expected to compete. Because the more competitive the global game gets, the faster women's cricket grows everywhere. If you enjoy deep dives into the structural and tactical forces shaping the future of women's cricket, please subscribe to Women's Cricket Central right now. And let me know in the comments, which associate nation do you think will be the first one to break through?